Right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to AWAI's Great Books Club. And this month I am super excited. Not that I'm not always excited, but I'm very excited this month because we have a very special guest, Clayton Makepeace, who's joining us for How to Write a Good Advertisement by Victor Schwab. And there is so much in this book, we were just talking before the call started, that I don't even know how we're going to get through all of this. As Katie brought up last time, I have once again probably overestimated the amount of material we can cover, but we're going to give it a good try. I really wanted to have Clayton run the 100, like the 100 headlines, but I knew that if I tried to squeeze 100 questions in here, that I would have been cut off at the knees. So I'm going to limit myself.
Everyone would have just had to pack a dinner.
That's right, that's right. But we are going to continue this conversation on Facebook, and I'll talk more about that later because I really want to get deep into these books and keep all of us exploring and using them in our daily creative work. So I'll talk more about that at the end. So without further ado, I want to introduce our special guest, Clayton Makepeace. And I want to tell you, you all know that Clayton is, I'll just say, a gazillionaire copywriter, more successes than I could even list on this call. But the reason why I asked Clayton to join me for this book is because when we were at the event in Sarasota, Florida this past May, working on the Makepeace method for building a successful copywriting business, what Clayton said was that if you want to build a successful copywriting business, you first have to have your basic tool set. I suppose like a chef, it'd be your really good knife set, right? You have to have the tools of your craft. And for Clayton, what he said is one of the biggest tools of his craft, the first that he started out with, the one that he holds in his hand all the time, is how to write a good advertisement. And then he actually came up with checklists that showed us how he took this book and uses it to go through his copy to make sure that he's met all the hurdles that we're going to see Schwab put forth for a good headline, for a good opening, for a lead, for engaging with people emotionally and intellectually in the copy. And because of that, I was really excited to ask if he would come and share a lot of this with you because I know we weren't all there in Sarasota. So I'm super thrilled to have Clayton with us today, and let's run the 12. I might not get you through the 100, but let's run the 12. This book is, okay, wait, no, I'm losing the track. Sorry, guys, I'm slowly catching on here. So the book was written by Victor Schwab. It was, he was born in 1898, and he took over, I won't even attempt to say this agency right, Sackheim and Sherman Agency. One of the things that impressed me the most about Schwab, I'm sure you guys can read more about his biography online, and of course you can read on the slide here, I won't read to you. But one of the things that impressed me the most was that as far as I know, Clayton, there may have been a few before him, but wasn't he, in my understanding, one of the first to really measure? So he didn't just say this is a good headline. He measured it because he was using coupons, and he could tell if people sent a coupon back or not.
Right. Throughout the book, he'll say, you know, when he talks about something that he tested, he'll say that this was a keyed ad. What that just means is there was a key code on the coupon. So they knew exactly what publication it came from, where it ran, when it ran, and they were able to compare results heads up. So.
And that means, for all of you listening, that means that this book is not just theory. This isn't, we think this headline sounded great or this was a clever sounding phrase. This means this was a headline that got people to send that keyed ad back. So these are proven headline formulas, not just guesses. And that makes all the difference when you're starting out as a copywriter. The book was first published in 1962, and Clayton was saying right before we started that you read it the first time, what, maybe 14 years after publication, you said? 14 or 15
well,
years
I think
after
it was 12
publication?
years. Yeah, I think it was in 1974 when I first.
And so you could, when you look at the arc of your career, you can certainly tell that by starting with this kind of foundation, you've really seen a lot of success by putting these ideas into action, I would say.
These are the foundational ideas, and I'm thrilled to see the book list that you're working through, Marcella, because like we were talking about before the call started, if you get the basic concepts that Schwab, Caples, Hopkins, Ogilvy teach, then that's the core of what you're going to need to be successful. There are a few things that are different today, and we'll talk about some of those today. But and there are also books that are more advanced, that maybe delve deeper into the human psyche and so forth. But these books that you're covering early in the series are really the ones that got me the chops I needed to start getting winners.
I think that's a great way to put it. I love calling it the core, partly because my background is from the University of Chicago, which is founded on something called the Common Core, which was the classics of Western literature, and we all had to read them starting out, every single one of us, no matter what you were going to graduate into, that's what you started with. And I like to think of this as our common core, whether you're going to evolve to writing financial copy, health copy, whether you're going to write for the web, whether you're going to do blog posts, this is your common core that you need to get the chops to do the job right and do the best job that you can. The other thing that I love about this book is that it's based on some simple articles that he wrote, which means it's very easy to follow. The ideas are spelled out super clear. You know exactly what he's telling you to do. And I just want to share with you, again, I'm gonna browbeat all of you at the end to join me for deeper conversation on Facebook. But one of the posts, which I love, came from Rick Hartman, and I want to tell you how he's been going through this book. And I want to encourage you all, once we get off this call, to do the same. And then I'm going to start running Clayton through the 100 here. But here is what Rick shared, and I think this is just absolutely brilliant. He says, Marcella, this has been very interesting for me. Since I couldn't find a Kindle edition, great for tired old eyes, I went ahead and splurged on the paperback version. Turned out to be not much of a paperback, but still a nice addition to my library. As soon as I flipped through the book and saw that it had quizzes, I knew this one was going to be different. Marking up a book has always been almost impossible for me, but this one has been the exception, and I think it's all because of the quizzes. Not only am I answering the quizzes, I'm writing the answers in the book, highlighting entire paragraphs, making written notes everywhere. Not exactly sure what inspired this for me. It's very strange behavior, but I really think it's the quizzes. I can't wait to hear everyone's comments. So you'll see this is a big book. It's a paperback book. It's not all that thick, but the type on the pages leaves you tons of room for highlighting and writing. And I think going back, once we get off this call, and answering all these quizzes at the end of each chapter is just absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to encourage all of you to do that, to really make sure you've got this information in your head. So with that said, and without further ado, those of you who joined us last time know that what I like to do is really focus on the actual text of the book. I like to ground us in the text itself. And then from there, ask questions and dig deeper as to what do these quotes mean and what are they pointing out to us. And again, full disclosure, I could have had, 5,000 slides, and I'm trying to limit this to one valuable information that I think Clayton, of all copywriters, is in a unique position to give to us, and also questions that I think speak to the largest themes in the book. So I want to start with the basis, really the common core of this book, which is the 5 fundamentals of a good advertisement. The book is based on 5 articles, each one of which was based on one of these fundamentals that Schwab wrote and then later expanded into the book. Number 1, get attention. Number 2, show people an advantage. Number 3, prove it. Number 4, persuade people to grasp this advantage. That one's a little tricky, and we're going to dig deep into that one on this call, because I think sometimes people confuse 2 and 4, and really there's a very subtle but important distinction between those 2. And I've got some questions for Clayton that I really am looking forward to asking to understand that differentiation myself a little better. And then number 5, ask for action. So Clayton, I want to start out just broadly by saying, do you agree with Schwab that these are the 5 most critical elements of an advertisement? Is there anything you would add today? And in your mind, which of these 5 is the most difficult to pull off, and why?
Okay, well, I think when you're reading these books that were published 40, 50 years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's important to keep in mind a couple of things. Number one is that the media have changed dramatically from what they were when these books were being written. Schwab was writing primarily about print ads, okay?
Yeah.
So, you know, these were obvious advertisements in magazines or newspapers. When you looked at it, you knew it was an advertisement. There was no hiding that fact because there was a coupon or a response device at the end of it.
Right.
And so it was kind of a no-brainer, right? So there was the subterfuge that we all indulge in when we're writing magalogs or other kind of infomercial promotions. Today, the strongest promotions that most people use are the ones that begin by disseminating a lot of information on a particular topic, preferably actionable information. And then after spending maybe 80 to 90% of the promotion actually bribing the prospect to stay with you to read it, and you finally present your product and your offer. So in addition to, I think his list is a very good one. It's a very basic one, given the assumption that you're writing an obvious ad.
That Al Gore hadn't invented the internet yet.
Right, exactly. So I would add a couple of things here. Number one, I would add convert that attention to readership. His first item was to get attention, right? But if you don't move people from the headline that grabs their attention, build a bridge to the opening copy where you show them an advantage, you're going to lose a lot of readership. So, you know, this is a different time to, you know, it's not only different media, we're more rushed, less focused. We have a lot more voices, you know, demanding our attention. So selling the prospect on engaging with your sales message is absolutely essential today. And then second, bribing the prospect to read. You know, if you're talking about reading just a one-page ad, that's going to take you, what, a couple of minutes to do it. Most people simply scanned it, got the high points, and then made a purchase decision. But we're doing 20 and 30 and 40-page VSLs and landing pages, not to mention 24 and 32-page direct mail pieces. So bribing the prospect to read is important. And that's where the value-added or actionable information in a promotion may come in. And it's really more than just making sure you're rewarding him for reading. You need to be telling him, here's how I'm going to reward you if you read this. So
you are great at putting those little breadcrumbs along the way, Clayton. You're almost like a Tom Clancy novel, you know, a mystery. You give me, you know, and in a few minutes I'm going to explain why. Or, you know, there's always sort of a cliffhanger, so I can't stop reading because there's something that you've told me is coming up, or you've dropped a crumb and I've got to keep going.
Exactly. And the key is that you don't just do it in the opening copy. You know, you weave that throughout so that every few pages you give them more reasons to stay with you. And in the early going, it's all about them. It's all about the theme of the piece. Let's say it's a promotion on, I don't know what. Let's say it's a promotion like End of America, okay? But dire predictions about the future of America. Well, at the beginning of the promotion, you know, you can tease them simply by saying, in this video or in this report, I'm going to tell you what you need to do immediately to protect yourself. And I'm going to show you how you can actually use this crisis to keep your wealth growing. Well, you know, and if you're more specific than that, it's even better. I'm going to name 3 stocks, or I'm going to name 3 investments, or whatever. But then as you move on through, the thing that you're teasing could be something different. It could be like the offer. It could be the free gift, the premium that you're going to give them. It could be, you know, something else. So, but the key is to And I do this after I've written the whole thing. I go through and I just, I set the size of the page on my screen so I can see like 3 pages across, 2 rows of pages. And I just look, okay, there should be a tease here, 3 or 4 pages in. And then I'll look at it and I'll say, okay, where can I fit something here to get to draw them back in? So that's very important.
It's almost like running a relay race. You're passing the baton from section to section to section to keep me running that race, to keep me following you through the page. And I think that is really important distinction that you're making. And it's almost like you've got to follow these 5, this sort of microcosm of Schwab's formula for getting attention, showing an advantage, proving it, and persuading them. It's almost like you're repeating it over and over and over again and adding that, what you're calling the bribe or the tease, as bridges from one to the next, to the next, to the next, so that you can hold attention for a lot longer than, 5 paragraphs.
Right, exactly. And then the third thing I'd say is we're a more skeptical society today.
Interesting.
So in Schwab's writing, item number 3 is prove it.
Yeah.
What he's talking about there is, prove your claims regarding the product. That's what he's referring to. But in addition to that, it's important, especially in longer copy, to also document the credibility of the person who's speaking to me. Because it doesn't matter what they say about the product if I don't trust them or if I don't think they're qualified to give me this information, then it's going to fall on deaf ears. And so, making sure that very early in the copy, I do it quite often in a pre-head above the headline in a printed news. I'll say, from Larry Edelson, the man who told you to buy gold in 2000 at $265 an ounce, now says right? So we establish credibility early and often, then also at 2 or 3 pages in, where you say, hi, my name's Larry Edelson, and here's what I've done. So now you have another proof point for the credibility of the speaker. So
it's very important.
Things I would add, and they're not because Schwab didn't have it right. They're just simply because the media has changed and the times have changed.
And that's a perfect segue to my next quote, which is, it's funny when we look back and think this was written in the 1960s, right? Because here he's saying, do not underestimate the fierce competition you face in getting attention. Nobody in the world except you is waiting for your advertisement to appear. Everybody in the world except you would rather read the news, comic stories, articles, editorials, or even the obituaries. And I think when we think about that now, of course, we would replace everybody else in the world as checking their text messages, reading a tweet, checking their email, So I wanted to ask you, relative to what we just talked about, do you think the competition for attention in today's world has gotten even worse than in Schwab? And if so, what do we do as copywriters to overcome this? You just gave us one great answer, which is you continue to bribe people to read, and you have to hold their attention you have to grab their attention in short increments over longer copy blocks, if I'm saying that right.
Yep. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, so I was going to say, so talk to me a little bit about, let's just talk a little bit about how do we get attention today when people are bombarded with messages on everything from the opening page of my Kindle to the side of the car parked next to me in a parking lot that's got a Red Bull logo on it, Yeah,
it's tougher. There's no doubt that overall it is tougher. That there's a lot more demand for our attention than ever before. I think, and what that means is that we all have learned how to filter things better, to decide what's for us and what isn't very quickly. And we do that by looking at the look of a thing, the early copy, the headline, the deck copy, the opening copy. And we almost, without thinking about it, self-select what we're going to read or what we're going to watch. But there's another part to this, too, and that is that, remember, Schwab was writing display ads that went in magazines that were like Life, Look, Time, Newsweek, Better Homes and Gardens, Good Housekeeping. And so these were very broad general interest publications. But today, when you write a promotion, if your client has a brain in his head, he's not going into those places. Okay? What he's doing is he's very carefully selecting and segmenting media that will deliver the very best prospects for this product, people who are already interested in what you're writing. So that's a bit of an advantage today, okay? Yes, overall we have a lot more stuff tugging on us, but secondly, realize you're not writing your investment.
To the great unwashed masses, as Paris
right, to a 16-year-old pimply-faced kid with no money, okay? You're writing specifically to somebody who has demonstrated a desire in the past, usually by buying something, a desire in the past for investment information or investment products or health or whatever your niche is. So it's important to just keep that in mind too. And then
thank you.
Then, you know, what can we do to overcome it? You know, I work with a lot of copy cubs, and I have a lot of other writers trying to get on my team. And, you know, you would be amazed at how many of those people who are trying to get on my team will send me a letter with a dollar bill attached, or they'll send me a letter with a headline that says they laughed when I sat down to write copy. You know? Avoid derivative headlines. Avoid derivative headlines. Avoid doing something that makes it clear that you're stealing someone else's idea. Another way to cut through the chatter is, instead of just writing headlines, write leads. And you can see this, and I know the guys at Agora and Stansberry, I mean, to them this is 60% of every promotion. I was talking to Palmer about this some time ago, and he said he doesn't even like copywriters to go beyond page 2 or 3 on first draft. He wants to see the headline and see how the piece is set up, right? And then everything follows logically from that. I, 20 years ago, came upon the idea of writing the ultimate headline, and I redefined headline as everything that happens on page 1 and maybe the first half of page 2. Correct mail piece. And so what does that include? Well, it would include an eyebrow above the headline, a pre-head, okay, in which I can accomplish something. And typically I like to accomplish the credibility of my speaker in that, okay, by giving just very quickly in 1 or 2 lines his credentials. Secondly, is the headline, the stopper. And the only job that headline has is to stop the prospect and to make him read the deck. The deck copy is a couple of bold paragraphs that follow that main headline. And the only job of the deck is to sell them on reading the first paragraph of body copy. And then the first paragraph and every paragraph that follows is there simply to make you read the next paragraph. And so if you structure it that way, you're doing something that 99% of your competitors are not doing. You know, people are being drawn in, they're being given credibility right up front. The headline does its job, whether it's intrigue or a big promise or whichever direction you decide to go. And so the person is pre-sold on some of the things, some of the beliefs that they're going to have in order to ultimately make a buy decision. And so I think that helps you cut through.
And I think that's really critical, and it actually ties to something. I think it sort of answers this question number 3 too, because when you actually have to move beyond the headline and into that first page and a half of copy, you see if you can actually make that headline pay off. Because sometimes I've had an idea that just sort of I like the phrase of it. I think it sort of encapsulates the idea. I get in love with this headline. And then I'm on page 2. I'm trying to transition into exactly what you're talking about, into moving the attention through the copy, and all of a sudden I can't make it work. And I realized then, okay, either the concept is off and I can't make it pay off, or the headline isn't really expressing where I'm going in the body copy and I need to tweak it some more. And so by forcing yourself to go beyond just coming up with a good headline, you actually see if you're going to be able to execute the package. And the last thing you guys want to have happen as a copywriter is to have your client fall in love with the headline, accept the headline, and then you figure out you can't make the package work with that headline. And I have been in that situation, so I think this is great advice for don't just sit down and write 100 headlines. Write 100 2-page headline and lead and expand your definition of a headline. And I think that's great advice. Now, you might not do 100. You might pick 6 or 7 to try to develop. I mean, if you're lucky, if you can come up with that many ideas, but you darn sure don't want to just write 1. And I think that we can all agree on. So I think, Clayton, you've really covered a lot of number 3. You've talked about how can you not just copy these formulas simply by developing it further. That's one thing. I wondered if you had anything to add to this before we put on our spiked shoes and start running through some of these headlines in more depth. Is there anything else in general you wanted to say about not ending up with when I sat down at the typewriter and started to write copy?
Yeah.
They laughed when I sat down at the typewriter.
I think, and I did something like this in my Paramarketing Summit too, where I gave like, I think it was 50 different ways to write a headline. And,
I remember that.
But instead of, in fact, I think I did a boot camp last year too. But
yep.
The idea there is it's the strategy behind the writing of the headline is important, not the headline itself. You know, it's like a Beatles song. It's like a Beatles song. You know, we sit here and we think Day in the Life. John Lennon wrote that with a little break by Paul McCartney in it, right? And we think that's absolute freaking genius. You change one word in that thing and it doesn't work. Well, that's just because we're looking at it through hindsight, right? Because we know it's a classic, you know, and so we know that. Well, the same thing happens when you look at Schwab's headlines in here, and you're going, you know, the little mistake that cost a farmer $3,000 a year, and you're going, oh, that's just so brilliant. Well, what's brilliant about it is the thinking behind it. Okay, it's not the words themselves, although, you know, for example, saying little in there is really great because it suggests that I might have made that same mistake. Okay, I could be making that same mistake.
And the specificity of the 3,000 is great too.
Specificity of 3,000 and the size of the 3,000. I mean, when he wrote this, that was like tantamount to 30,000 today. So
right, that would have seriously put a dent in your profit.
Right. I don't know if we're going to go through more of these with the slides and so forth, but the idea here is to just kind of to think, what was the writer thinking? What was his objective when he wrote this? Then you can take that same objective and apply it to your product or your sales message, and then start playing with that formula, because really that is a formula.
And that's what I want to ask you about, Clayton, because so this one, you can see this comes from page 8. Sometimes the negative idea of offsetting, reducing, or eliminating the risk of loss is even more attractive to the reader than the prospect of gain. And here's where he phrases it in a different way. He says, of the 100 headlines, and remember, these are based on keyed ads. These are proven winners. 21, so more than 20%, are completely negative. 10 others start with a negative and then become positive. So when I was looking at this, I was thinking about how many times I've seen you do this. I've seen you use that fear of loss so powerfully in some of your controls, especially in the financial sector. And so when we're looking at these as formulas, and I can go back here so we can put that one up, I would be interested, just talk to me a little bit about, you know, how you make that negative risk of loss formula work, how you've done that so successfully.
Well, you know, I think there's even a name for it, a clever little name for it that I never remember, but it's the idea that everything we do essentially gets down to problem solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're leading with a negative headline, basically you're focusing on the problem part of the dark side of that equation, right? And that's all. You know, what you've done is you've come up and you've raised the specter of a horrible thing that's going to happen, and then you offer a solution, right? So if you could just have easily gone the other way and started with a solution and just said, you know, never fear heart disease again. You know, so you could go that direction. But
or the great fertilizer that could double your crop yields, I guess, in
yeah,
this example.
exactly.
Right?
How to have the greenest lawn on the block, right? But the thing is that there are a couple of things here. Number one, negatives, people, and this is a maxim, I forget who wrote it, but I use it all the time. People will do more and spend more to solve a current problem than they will to achieve a positive result in the future.
Yep.
So when I'm given the choice of having a negative headline or a positive headline, I will quite often, more often than not, choose the negative track. Okay? And in the health market, it's the same kind of thing. Now, and of course, there are all kinds of nuances and shades of gray in this. I did a package on oral chelation where the headline was "The Heart Attack That Didn't Happen." There you have a perfect amalgam of both the negative and the positive all in one headline. So, like I said, there are a lot of nuances, a lot of different ways to do it. But typically, I'll default to the negative. And negative is ideal when you're dealing with a complex problem or a topical issue or something that contains an emotional component like NSA spying or Obamacare or something like that, and you really want to get the people into a lather before you present your solution. So negative really works that way. But there are some rules for using it. Rule number one is whatever the negative thing is, it needs to directly impact the reader. It can't be something negative that's going to happen out there, and you know, like I have a client that wanted to do this whole thing on wars all over the world. You know, this rising tide of violence. And
but I only care if I'm about to be shot.
Yeah, exactly. Or if that rising tide of violence is going to crush the U.S. economy or do something else that's going to affect me personally. So it's not an intellectual exercise where we're talking current events. It's got to be about me, okay, the reader. Secondly, it's got to directly impact the reader today. You know, not understanding that your prospect is into instant gratification is one of the cardinal sins that copywriters commit. You know, they don't care about a problem that's going to occur 10 years from now or next year or even next month. They care about today, and they don't care about. So this happens a lot in the financial area. Just very quickly, I know we're running long already, but in the financial market, the advisors will quite often make a forecast and say the housing market is going to bust. You know, and my main client did this. The housing market is going to bust. Nobody cared. Why? Because you're asking me to.
It wasn't happening today.
Yeah, you're asking me to invest in your product on faith that this forecast will be correct. It's crazy, you know, and it gets.
You know what we saw at Schaefer's is people would just sit and wait to see if you were right. If you said something was going to happen 6 months from now, they thought, well, I'll just sit and wait, and if it does happen, then I'll buy it. I'll wait for 6 months and see if you were right.
It's got to be a present danger. It's got to be a real threat. a real problem right now.
To quote Tom Clancy, a clear and present danger.
There you go. And the reader needs to be painfully aware of this problem or threat.
Okay.
You know, this has got to be something that you don't have to go to great lengths to prove to him that he's in danger or that he has a problem. That's an unnecessary sale that you'd have to make. You know.
Gotcha.
And then finally, in your lead, again defined as the first page and a half, you need to offer or tease a solution. You need to send the message that this is not just about getting depressed and sitting around and you know, having a good pity party. This is about solving this problem.
I've seen writers spend the entire first page agitating the problem, and by then I've given up, right? Because they haven't promised me a solution to it, and I'm 7 paragraphs in.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a classic, especially in the financial market. I have made that classic mistake before. And you've got, again, it goes back to what you were talking about with the crumbs, right? If you're going to agitate and really broaden and deepen the problem, make sure you're dropping crumbs, that you've got the solution to it and that you've got an easy way to make money from it or avoid loss, or, you know, you got to tell them that the happy solution is coming and that you've got it for them.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about another kind of, obviously with the 100 headlines, there's multiple themes in here. So I'm trying to just focus on ones that I've seen folks either struggle with, that I've struggled with myself, that I think, just like you said so brilliantly, Clayton, are nuanced. You know, yes, you can do a negative headline, but it's nuanced, and you have to make sure you handle it correctly and you follow these steps. So the other one I want to ask you about is interrogative headlines or questions, right? So he gives some classic examples here, which are sort of fun. And he says, are you ever tongue-tied at a party? We've got, are they being promoted right over your head? And I love this one. Are we a nation of lowbrow? And they're asking, so he says, as you go along, you'll notice many are questions. They ask a question to which people want to read the answer. The best ones are challenges, which are difficult to ignore, cannot be dismissed with a quick no or yes, and without further reading, and are pertinent and relevant to the reader. So I just wanted to ask you, in general, when have you seen a question work in a headline, and when have you seen it not? And are there any dangers or pitfalls, just like you talked about on the negative headlines, that we should be aware of or watch out for when trying to do a question headline?
Yeah, and this is my personal bias. I don't like interrogative headlines for a couple of reasons. Number one, I feel that questions are weaker than declarative statements.
Interesting.
Secondly, there's always the danger of the unexpected answer or the unwanted answer.
Or the no, right?
Yeah, exactly. Do you make these mistakes in English? Hell no.
Done. Next.
Yeah. You make this mistake that it costs a farmer $30,000 a year. I'm not a farmer. No, I don't. So
right.
A question can work, but unless it is crafted with, go back to the slide where he talks about how the question was crafted. There you go.
Yep.
At the end of that, he says, the best ones are challenges that are difficult to ignore. You know, that would be the kind of headline that says, can you draw this pirate, or can you
right.
name the 3 this, or can you name?
You know, Paris and I have a very simple one that turned out to be a control, and I think it spoke to this, are pertinent and relevant to the reader, and it was just a blood sugar problem, question mark. Then the subhead was, the culprit may be this common toxin found in most homes. So I think there, I was just sort of trying to get people to raise their hand, like, are you having blood sugar problems? So that stopped them. It's sort of like the farmer, right? If you were a farmer, you cared about that headline. If you weren't, you went on. So this only got people with blood sugar problems to stop. But then the subhead really carried the work of the headline, I think, right, by saying it could be this common toxin found in most homes, and that's sort of the negative thing right now. I'm scared. I got to know what it is. I can't dismiss it without further reading, because now I've got to know if the reason I'm having blood sugar problems is because I have that toxin in my home, and I got to know what it is.
I can see how that would work, especially if you took the next step and said, P.S., this common toxin is also a cause of blank, 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 and blank. Now you widen the net, right?
Right.
So I'm terrified of the word toxin, even if I don't have blood sugar problems, if you say it already also contributes to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, heartbreak of psoriasis, whatever, now you've got a really broadly thrown net. So I will default to a declarative statement, but if I'm going to use a question, I would follow his prescription there, but also say it should be, the question itself needs to be intriguing, as in a self-test, a self-test.
I love those self-test examples. Those that can you draw one just ran forever. Right,
yeah. Or a rhetorical question. I just used this on something. Whose side is Obama on anyway?
Interesting. So you're starting a conversation with that one.
Yeah, and obviously I'm going to conservatives, libertarians, people who don't like Obama in the first place. By saying that, they know I'm immediately on their side. And I'm posing a question, really putting into words a question they may already have if they just read about setting 5 Taliban generals free, right? So a rhetorical question like that, where you're basically putting your prospect's emotions into words, is a really great way to use a question. And
let's say that again. A rhetorical question where you are putting your prospect's emotions into words. That is just brilliant and so subtle, but that's a gem. I want to make sure everyone gets that. And when we're talking about getting emotion into the copy, I want to remember that. So he's just given us one example of how to stir emotion in the headline by using a rhetorical question like that. You know that they now know you're part of their tribe. You speak their language. You're speaking to them. They feel engaged in the conversation. You're talking to where they're at. That's just a gem. Thank you for that one. I love that.
And you trust people who hold your beliefs and your views.
Of course you do. Yeah, they're like me. They're my tribe. Yeah.
Right. And I'm trustworthy, therefore they must be. Keep in mind, Rush Limbaugh doesn't have a product. I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars that guy's worth, but all he ever does is put his listeners and readers' feelings into words, expresses them, so he's cathartic for them. They can listen to him and nod their heads, right? There's value in that. People paid millions of dollars to have Rush and all of these other talk show people do that for them. So that has tremendous value. And they
give me a sense of belonging, too, right? Because now I know I'm part of something, a movement or a belief system.
And the final one is a question that the prospect is already asking himself, okay? So let's say there's a well-established fact, let's say the fact is that America is the number one source of energy in the world now. We have more energy in the ground than the rest of the world combined, thanks to fracking and horizontal drilling. So let's just say you're going to an audience that subscribe to an energy newsletter and they know this fact, right? So what is the prospect asking him, given that fact? Well, he's asking himself, man, there must be a way for me to make some money on this. How can I make money? Or more importantly, how are the insiders playing this? Revolutionary new development. So using a question in a situation like that can be very effective too.
I was thinking also you can go against something that people already assume and twist it. I was trying to think of, like, there were a whole bunch of sort of anti-fish oil headlines that came out, right, when there was all this confusing information, about it was good for you and then it wasn't good for you, and then, and when you ask a question like that, I think you can also, again, get intrigue going and get them wanting to know. I tried one that did not work. It was too far after the curve. I was late to the game, as they say. But I tried one that is fish oil the new snake oil, because everyone was saying it was great, and then there were studies coming out that wasn't. So I do think sometimes I've seen a question in the health area work when it called out something that I believed was true but made me question it, and then was followed up with a fact, 1,500 studies show it's worthless or something, that would grab my attention.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to some to another key thing that I wanted to ask you about headlines before we finish with the 100 here. And I know we're just barely brushing the tip of the iceberg on all of these headlines. So, but again, I'm trying to focus on a few things that I think we all struggle with. And one that I struggle with often is guarantees. When should I put a guarantee in the headline? When is it not a good idea to put a guarantee in the headline because I'm signaling that I'm writing a sales letter? To the earlier point that you brought up on the call where you said, today we have to have a little more sleight of hand. We don't like to scream, this is an ad. I'm not in the middle of a magazine clearly looking like an ad. So when you look at a headline like this, guaranteed to go through ice, mud, or snow, or we pay the tow, you could see how that would work in a big space ad. So my question to you is, when do you use a guarantee in a headline? What are some of the more creative guarantees you've used? And when do you not want to put a guarantee in the headline because it's like waving a flag that says I'm going to try to sell you something,
Yeah. Well, again, he was writing obvious ads, and so putting a guarantee in a headline is cool, in a situation like that. To lead out by saying not only is this an ad, I'm going to guarantee that this works. So that it works that way. I think a corollary in what we do today. See, what he was advertising to cold lists of magazine subscribers, basically, and the corollary for today is that from time to time, when clients hire us, they're going to ask us to write one of two kinds of copy. They're either going to ask us to write an acquisition piece that will be seen by non-customers and people who don't know anything about me, who've never bought a product from me. And that is the long copy, magalog, value-added information, actionable information, bribe them to read it kind of copy. via magalogs, long landing pages, long VSLs, and so forth. So that kind of copy is crafted for people who don't know you. But then there's another kind of copy you'll be asked to write, if you're lucky, if you're good, and that is, because there's a lot of money in it, and that is the house file promotion. This is where you're asked to write a promotion that goes to people who have already bought a product from this company. So at Money and Markets, for example, when one of my subscribers gets an email in his inbox from me, he knows there's a pretty darn good chance that this is about a product that I want him to buy.
Right.
And, you know, so in a situation like that, putting a guarantee up front, especially if it's powerful and detailed, not just, you know, goes through mud and snow guaranteed, but, or, you know, doubles your wealth guaranteed, but something that's more specific than that, more detailed than that, can work extremely well, especially if it's unusual, they're not expecting it. So, you know, in the past...
We had one at Schaefer's, which was, that worked for a long time, which was for really aggressive option traders. And the guarantee was, I won't get this right, but it was like we promised 25 100+ percentage winners, meaning we promised that 25 of the trades you got over the next year would deliver at least 100% or more. And again, it went to the house file. It went straight at their greed. That's why they're on these lists, is because these were aggressive trades. They wanted the big hits, and we're basically saying we promise we'll give you 25 big hits in the next 12 months.
Yep. Yeah, or you don't pay for the service. And again, that works because it was obvious. They could see you coming a mile away. They knew that you were wanting them to buy a product, and you could immediately alleviate that tension between the salesman and the prospect by saying, look, there's no risk in this for you. Before you even know what it is, there's no risk in this for you. So, and
you know, they already want to read it. They're already engaged with you. I think that's a great distinction. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I'm aware we're running out of time. We're talking about the point of view, and you've already given us some great examples, so I'm not going to spend, I'm going to kind of skip over this question. We can weave it into some of our answers later. I think you are the master, and we've talked about this a lot, of infusing the point of view simply by knowing where the reader is at. You've talked about speaking directly at their belief system, engaging their emotions with questions. All of those are ways of infusing this idea of you throughout the promotion, other than just repeating the word you. You're really putting yourself in the prospect's shoes and reacting to that, and I think that's critical. I want to ask you about this next one, because this is something that I get asked a lot by folks who are new to a particular segment. So let's say it's someone who hasn't written for the health market before, someone who hasn't written for the financial market, or maybe they've written editorial for the health market and now they're writing for a specific marketer in the health market. And it's this maxim of start where the reader is. So what I get asked is, well, how do I know where my particular reader is with respect to any product or service? How do I know what they believe? So if you're offering something about gold, let's say, how do I know what their beliefs are about gold? How do I know who they are in the market on your list with respect to this idea of gold versus someone on a completely different list? You know, how do I figure out where this reader that I'm speaking to is at? Does that make sense?
Yeah, there are a bunch of ways to do that. Number one, talk to likely prospects. Talk to other people who are like your prospect in some way. You need to start by finding out who you're talking to, okay? What lists is this going to? What other products have they bought in the past? Again, we talked about the SRDS. You know, you can say, okay, well, this is a gold product. Okay, so who are we going to? Well, we're going to go to Monex and Merit Financial product buyers or leads. You say, okay, well, you know, how have they been advertised to? How did those companies get these guys on their list? And you'll start getting, and what media did they advertise through? You know, if they all came from Fox News, that gives you some pretty important clues, right? To their political views and so forth. Secondly, and if you go to the SRDS, the Standard Rating Data Service, for mailing lists and also for e-lists, they'll tell you the source of the names on these people's lists that your client is renting and that he's going to send your message to. Another thing to do is to study the controls with this thought in your mind. You know, if this worked well, what does that say about what these people believe?
Right. What assumptions are embedded in that control?
Right. And it's not just your client's control, it's all of his competitors' controls. You know, and you can ask your client for that. You say, I'm sure you collect your best promos.
Yeah.
I send me copies because I want to see what they're doing. And if any of them are doing better than your promos, I want to know that too. You know, so you can study that, and that'll give you a lot of clues. Look at what they're reading and watching. That's important. Now, not only go deeper than just say what's the list and what has that list sold them in the past, but look at the source of those names. And then there's finally the Zen method. And this is what I use most often now. After 43 years of doing this stuff, I basically sit back and say, okay, if I had this problem, how would I feel about it? What would I want? What would I need to hear in order to make a purchase decision? And you can intuit a lot of it. I mean, you use gold as an example, right? Well, look, if I'm not worried about inflation, if I'm not worried about the value of the dollar crashing, if I'm not worried about civil unrest or even international unrest, wars, then gold's not going to hold much fascination for me. So you're talking to somebody who's concerned about all of those things. So.
And I think that's a great way to do it. And in fact, when you look through how to write a good advertisement, of course, that's exactly what Schwab does when he tries to look at all the motivating factors, the emotions. So this is a great transition to what I want to ask you about in terms of emotions. And that's what he does. He just puts himself in their shoes, and for each type of he's saying, how do I feel about my boss? What do I feel about work? How do I feel about my body? And he puts that into, here's what I would be thinking if I wanted these things in my life. Here's these desires and how they play out. And I think that, I'm talking, guys, about the pages, 48, 49, 53, where he does the advantage, improved appearance, and then he says, he just starts speaking in an I tone. And I think what Clayton's telling us to do is absolutely perfect. So do your research, make sure you're reading everything that's out there, get all these materials for the client, then put them away, set that box aside, then sit down, close your eyes, go back, get into the I voice, put that prospect's shoes on, and just start, pretend your analyst is across the room on the couch, right? Just start spewing out what you're feeling, and that's going to really help you tap into that. Katie, I want to check.
Just let me add. I was talking with Gary Benzavenga about this one time, and he said, what he does is he personifies that person. After finding out what they're like and what they think about, he says, that's just like my Uncle Fred. And then he writes a little thing to his Uncle Fred.
I love it.
This old codger, and he knows exactly, what Uncle Fred needs to hear in order to make a purchase decision. So.
That is another gem, guys. I want everyone to pay attention to that. So what Clayton is saying, and oh my God, I love this. I love this. What you're saying is, look, now after you go through all of this I statement and really getting a picture of your mind, go, who do I know who is like that? Who have I met? Who's in my circle of acquaintances? Who's, relative, friend, family member who has these characteristics? Now when you sit down to write, you're not writing to some abstract prospect. Now you're writing to Uncle Fred, and that warmth and that passion is just going to come out. It can't not come out, And that makes a huge difference in your tone. It's so subtle, but I can tell the difference when I read the copy. And I know that you can too, Clayton, when you've seen where someone really knows the prospect,
Well, and it really takes care of that whole you and I thing too, writing individually.
Exactly. Now it's going all throughout the copy because you're directly motivated and speaking to this other human being. Katie, I want to check with you to see if and Clayton with you too, are we okay to keep going for a little bit?
It's up to Clay. It's fine. This is gold, so it's up to you two as long as you can go. But
I'm going to beg, please,
Clayton. No, I definitely want to finish up.
Good.
They'll be throwing rotten tomatoes and dead cats at us if we don't finish up.
I didn't even have to use my whiny baby doll eyes and my whiny begging voice. So I have to use on my husband to get the garbage taken out. Okay, so this is, I said when we started the call that one of the reasons why I really wanted Clayton on this call was because I had seen firsthand when he was speaking to us in Sarasota how important this book is to him and how he's really incorporated it into the success arc of his career. And when I read it again, I will say, Clayton, that when I got to the 12 major desires that motivate people and to this whole section, which is talking about how to, sort of agitate those desires, this is what you do that to me stands out from any other copywriter in the business, because you have emotion packed in every sentence of that copy, and you get me excited about things that I've never been excited about in my life by the time I finish the copy, just because of the way that you phrase it. It's fun to read. I feel engaged. So what I want to talk to you about is in looking at these desires that he brings up, better health, more money, popularity, comfort, leisure, pride of accomplishment, improved appearance, business advancement, social advancement, enjoyment, security in old age, praise from others. Can you tell me, you've got that wonderful process that you use for getting to the deeper benefits of the product. How do you take these emotions and elicit them so freaking amazingly in your copy?
Well, first of all, I would go through this list of desires and I would say, okay, these are superficial, non-specific, vague desires, okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're absolutely true, every one of them, okay?
But they're kind of generic.
They're very generic. Does anybody just think, I want more money? Or do they have these almost sexual fantasies of what they would do if they won the lottery? Of what they do if they won the lottery, Do they really want, quote, better health? What does that really mean? Does it mean, I would have dinner with Jeff Walker 2 nights ago. This guy rides in the mountains at 6,000 feet elevation a bicycle, and he's going up mountains that go up to 10,000 feet elevation. That's good health. I mean, that guy has a heart like a bull. I mean, if I tried to ride to the end of the block, I'd just pass out and die. So, define what these things are and then make the reader actually feel them, Pride of accomplishment. It's called dimensionalizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I talk all the time about the product has several layers, okay? The first is features. Every feature is there for a reason. The reason is to deliver a benefit. So the next thing we have practical benefit, okay? Feature is lawnmower has a sharp blade, okay?
Right.
Benefit is it cuts the grass on the first pass. It is practical benefit, right? So what's the next level then to that benefit? Well, you spend less time mowing your lawn. Well, what's the next benefit to that? Well, you have more time to do the things, to play tennis, to get specific.
Right.
Whatever. And then,
or the guy next door is still trying to mow the grass, and you're sitting with a cold beer at the bar down the street already done.
Well, now you're getting to the emotional benefit, okay? You wave at your neighbor who's still mowing his lawn as you're on the way down to the bar to watch the big game, right? So now you're starting to feel the benefit rather than just, oh, yes, I have an intellectual acknowledgement that I will have my lawn mowed sooner, right? So when I look at these kinds of things, it's an onion. I want to peel it, right? And
I want to stop you for 1 second and just drive that home because I experienced what you just said in my body. So when you said now you start to feel the benefit, I just want to do this on the call real quick. So guys, if I say cuts the grass on the first pass, in my body, there's no emotional reaction to that. I'm like, oh, that's nice. That's kind of clever. Nice. You know what I mean? There's nothing. When you say, Clayton, when you said in your great words, you're waving to the guy mowing his grass next door as you're on the way down the street to have a cold beer and watch the big game, now I have an emotional reaction to that. Like I'm a little bit gloating. I'm kind of laughing because the description of it is so true and so funny. I'm having a physical reaction of it's 110 in the shade and I'm sweating and this guy's going by me because he's already going to sit down and watch the game. I'm going to miss the game because I got to mow the damn lawn because my wife's been yelling at me to do it. It takes it to a whole nother level. And so what you just gave me is a clue. When I do this, I can check myself in my body to say, when I say that phrase, did I feel it yet? If I didn't feel it yet, I'm probably not deep enough yet.
That's right. Exactly. If you don't, and I was at Phillips and they asked me, how can you tell good copy from bad copy? And I said, well, good copy gives you a little tingle. That's
it's true.
You can go on for pages or hours about good copy does this, good copy does that, But if it doesn't give you a tingle, then it's not engaging you on the level it needs to elicit a maximum response. I was writing a promotion once, and it was about this guy who had an investment approach that he was using highly leveraged stuff, options. And the investment approach had a certain level of potential return. It was very high. And so, you know, I could have written, you know, earn a 2,000% return in 13 days or less, you know, or something like that.
Which sounds like everything else we've ever read.
But instead I wrote, how would it feel to walk up to the teller at your local bank and casually hand her a deposit for $100,000?
Wow.
How about $250,000? How about $500,000?
Oh my God.
And what if you went back next week and did the same thing? Okay?
See, this is how you do it. This is what makes me say I am not worthy, because I, like, getting from that, from saying, which we all do, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, every first starting financial copywriter is like, what's the benefit? You know, make 200% in 10 days. Get that in your headline. But to take it to, one, you made a word picture. Now I'm standing at the bank, which I've done a million times, with my deposit slip. So now I'm actually in the story in my mind. I'm at the bank. I got the deposit slip in my hand. Now when you told me the amount on it, I'm frickin' looking at the deposit slip and I'm seeing those numbers written out, right? And now I'm imagining myself handing it to her. My whole being is engaged. How do you do that?
Well, and just by drilling down to what the ultimate goal is. There is something nuanced in there, too. It was very sexual. Did you get it? I'm writing to guys, and the teller is a woman. and he,
of course!
And he casually hands her the thing like, this is no big deal, like I do this all the time. Okay?
So there's a bit of strutting and...
yes.
Yeah, you're hitting other benefits, too. There's a little ego stroking in there, too. Yeah.
But it's not only self-validation, it's not only ego, but now there's this good-looking teller at the bank that thinks he's pretty cool.
Now, so, you know, for all the women here, we're going to have to do another one that turns this around, right?
Oh, absolutely. Totally fair.
Totally fair. I love it.
Keep in mind, we're not selling what you think we're selling. Okay, we're not selling profits. Okay, we're the thing that our prospect desires more intensely than that are all of the feelings that go along with being successful. And we're not selling health. What we're selling are all the feelings that go along with not fearing disease, being confident, and performing your best. And in both cases, think about all the ramifications. Think about how your partner is going to look at you differently when you come home with that $500,000 payday. Think about how, so now we're talking security of relationship.
Right.
It's not about buying a damn option. It's about making sure your wife doesn't run off with her tennis instructor. So, you know, just try to get down to the bottom. You know, what is it really that he wants?
And I have to say, Clayton, this to me is what your ability to do this is what distinguishes you from everyone else I study. It's just like a sixth sense with you that you just go there automatically. And I know I'm going to talk a little out of school here. I know you had emailed a whole bunch of us asking, you know, for ideas and suggestions for what you might talk about at boot camp this year. And I know I was jumping up and down, begging, pleading that you would go deeper into how you do this, how you get these emotional benefits into your copy. So I just have to put you on the spot and ask, am I going to get some of that at boot camp this year?
Yeah, I decided to go that direction. Yep.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna tell everybody here that just, you know, if you aren't signed up already, you've gotten just the tip of the iceberg, just a little bit of a taste here of the power that you can see when you go from something like, you know, make 2 times your money in 10 days to standing at the bank counter with that deposit slip. And that is the difference between good B plus copy, maybe even getting closer to an A double minus, and getting a triple plus copy that can bring in millions of dollars. So I know that I will be in the front row seat taking copious notes and probably waving my hand frantically for questions at the end on this. So I really appreciate you giving us just a taste here, and I'm gonna really encourage folks to make sure, if you haven't already signed up for boot camp, you should, but those of you who are signed up for boot camp, let's take over the front role on this one, because this is critical, and I think this is really at the heart of what Schwab is trying to say makes a good advertisement. It goes, like you said, beyond features to these deeper emotional triggers and benefits. And with that said, I want to move to the next.
Marcella, I am just going to jump in. And
yes,
this is great. And we just got like Alan, Stacy just wrote in and said this is a priceless discussion, and it is, and I'm loving every minute of it. But I am keeping an eye a little bit on the clock here. So
yep.
I think it's 10 after 4. So I think we should have everything wrapped up, including the questions, by 4:30. So
that sounds good.
Okay. So like let's say another 10 minutes to get through these next couple points, and then we'll save 10 minutes for questions. Good?
And I think actually we've covered some of these. So, for example, I think we're going to be able to move through these pretty quickly. This next one.
No, and that's, it is worth its weight in gold, definitely. But so carry on.
And people got to eat dinner, and it's happy hour here, you know? So Clayton, I just want to ask you real quickly, how do you balance sort of the cold hard facts with the emotional appeal we've been talking about? So when you're writing, how do you kind of go back and forth between cold hard facts and triggering these deeper emotions? Is there just sort of a little gem or two you can give us on that?
Well, you don't. Basically, you don't speak with two voices, one for facts and one for emotion. It's not a zero-sum game. You present your proof elements emotionally, okay, and you present your emotional appeals with proof attached. It's a tone question that pervades the entire piece. And the one thing you have to be careful about is, over-the-top emotion. Kennedy has this great thing about this, where the emotion needs to be appropriate to the message. If the emotion is, if his thing is about telling your neighbor his roof is on fire, right?
Oh, I remember that.
Remember that? You go over there and you say, "Pardon me, sir, your roof seems to be oxidizing rather rapidly." He's going to think you're nuts, right? But if you go over there, bang on his door, and scream fire, you're going to get the appropriate reaction. So, if your emotional tone is too high or too low, it's going to hurt the credibility of the piece. So
I think that's great feedback, and I'm going to challenge you to, I'm going to ask you nicely, actually, if when you're talking at boot camp, if you will bring this up and maybe share a little bit more with us about how you combine facts and emotions, how you partner those two things together so that we can really see how that works. If you can bear us a slide or two on that, that would be terrific at boot camp this year. So we just talked about that. I think that we've really covered a lot of question 11. You spent a lot of time on this at the beginning with us, which giving us all your tips for how you can hold interest throughout a long video sales letter. So I'm not going to reiterate that. And this last one, we could really start a whole conversation on this one. So I'm going to hold off on this one, and I will offer up that perhaps Clayton and I could pick an evening to meet at the bar at boot camp or in that little circle area, and we could have a mini battle of the sexes where we talked about, is there a difference between writing to men versus women, and do we agree or disagree with Schwab that it is harder to sell a woman than a man, which I thought was just hysterical. So we might have to have that one over beer. But I do have one that I want to get in from one of our book club members, partly because I'm trying to encourage people to carry the baton with me and participate with questions on the Facebook page ahead of time. And we've actually worked out now, and I'm going to give you a link in just a second, that the page no longer moves with the events. So we have a permanent home on Facebook now where we can continue discussions on past books and talk about future books. So this comes from Rick Hartman, and he was looking at this quote on page 77 that says, your testimonials should actually be tied to the reason. In other words, they should be localized. So if you're, you want to have people in Tulsa see testimonials from people in Tulsa. And his question was, how does that stand up against this celebrity-driven culture? In other words, is it better to, if you live in Tulsa, to see a testimonial from Edna in Tulsa, or to see one from Kim Kardashian because you follow everything Kim Kardashian does and you think she's amazing? Do you have any thoughts on that, how this sort of celebrity-driven culture changes testimonials or not?
I just don't think the two are mutually exclusive. The fact of the matter is, if you can get celebrity endorsements, that's a good deal. If you can get consumer testimonials, that's almost mandatory. If your product warrants localizing the testimonials, and you can get them, which is going to be a 1 in a million shot. I mean, how many times is somebody going to ask you to do a space ad for, like Halbert used to do? It's localized to a particular city, and who will have testimonials from every city that he wants to advertise in. I mean, it's never happened to me in 42 years. But none of these things are mutually exclusive. I think one of the problems, I love celebrities. I'm getting ready to launch a product. We're very early in the process where we're going to be launching with a national infomercial, and naturally we will have a celebrity on the program along with our product inventor. Well, the celebrity is going to cost me $100,000 just to show up, and she's got to have a trailer, and she's got to have a special makeup artist, and because I'm using a celebrity, it has to be a union shoot. So just adding a celebrity to the infomercial is going to be another $250,000.
Holy mackerel.
So sometimes it gets down to just a value proposition.
A budget issue, yes.
Yeah, a lot of people who use celebrities too. You got to understand there's no guarantee of success. You have to be very careful to get the right celebrity. And
it has to make sense.
Yeah, whether you're marketing to men or women is a big part of that, I think. Take Chuck Norris's exercise machine that he does, right? Well, Chuck's this big old hairy guy, and he's a male action star that most women probably didn't even know who he was until he started doing those things. So what did they do? Well, they got Christy Brinkley to go on there with him. They have a supermodel on there who can speak to the women in the audience, who are actually going to be like probably 70% of the people that buy that thing. So and now think about that $250,000 for one celebrity. If Norris didn't own this other product, you'd be looking at $500,000 before you even start production just for your celebrities. So, but it's important.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, celebrity fits the thing.
I gotta tell a funny story about that on David, and then he'll probably kill me when he listens to this call. But do you remember he did an infomercial for Boardroom? This has been some time ago for a health product, and they were all excited that they got John Cleese to be the spokesperson, right? And John Cleese films this, and everybody thinks that it's a spoof. Because it's John Cleese, right? He's a comedian. So they thought that it was actually a spoof of a health infomercial, not a real health infomercial. So needless to say, it did not do well.
Yeah, it's got to be the right celebrity. It's got to be appropriate to the audience, not just the product. So
now I'm going
I would have both,
And I love the answer. So the answer, it's the same one that you gave me with facts versus emotions. It's not an either or proposition, it's a both and. And so yes, local's good. It would be great if I knew that, you know, my neighbor down the street used the product and had a great experience. It's also perfect that some celebrity I admire that's in this category that makes sense with this product says this is the best thing since sliced bread, or it's made her skin younger, or whatever. So now I want to put you on the spot just a little bit, Clayton, and ask you a favor. I'm using my whiny, please take out the trash voice here. And the favor is, when I started out the call by saying the reason I asked you to join me is because in Sarasota, you shared some fantastic checklists. I think there were 3 of them, if my aged brain remembers right, that you had created from this book, from How to Write a Good Advertisement, to help you make sure you were following some of these, as we talked about, common core principles. Would you be willing to share just 2 or 3 of those checklists with book club members, just as sort of a looking forward to seeing you at boot camp, or just a little hug for us? Could I ask if you'd share some of those with us?
Absolutely. Katie,
Yay!
I'm spending the month in Colorado, but maybe Marcella, you could look at those PowerPoints and just pull them out.
I would love to do that. Thank you so much. I know that I kind of sprung this on you, but I just think that would be just such great value for everybody here. And of course, your courses are loaded with it. So you guys could just think of these as little tastes of some of the great stuff that you've gotten on this call. And you all know that AWAI has at least 2, right, Katie, right now, courses from Clayton that you've offered up?
And more in the works. Yes, yes. Well, no, 3. Yeah, and they're all,
I love it.
master level, master class programs.
I think you guys can already see how much Clayton over-delivers even on this call, and you have been so generous. And I myself have looked forward to this so much because I knew I was going to get answers to things that are going to help me, and I've got stars all over my little notes here. I'm trying to drive and take notes at the same time, which is a dangerous proposition here. I wanted to also talk just really quickly about next month's book club, which was also inspired by Clayton's Sarasota event. At that event, one of the things that Clayton had us all do was I'll paraphrase, but tell our origin story. How did we start out in the business? How did we get clients? How did we market ourselves? And that's how I found out that one of David's first jobs in the industry was working for David Ogilvy, right? So I decided who better to talk to us about Ogilvy on advertising than David Deutsch. And as those of you who were on early before we kicked off, you heard Clayton say that he really considers Ogilvy on advertising another one of these books in the Common Core that we're building here. So next month, David Deutsch is going to join us. We're going to discuss Ogilvy on advertising, and I'll just read you briefly what I emailed him, and here's what he said back. He said, I lucked out when the first job I landed in advertising was with Ogilvy and Mather on Madison Avenue in New York City, where I came under the influence of one of the true giants of advertising and persuasive writing. But you don't have to be an Ogilvy alumni to benefit from his wisdom and brilliance. Ogilvy revealed his secrets in his book, especially Ogilvy on Advertising, where not only does he spell out the how-to's of selling through the power of words and pictures, but he exemplifies it in the clarity, charm, and persuasiveness and salesmanship of the book itself. So again, if you haven't read and studied Ogilvy on Advertising, you're flying blind. So I hope that you are going to join us. And with that said, I'm going to ask Katie if she will announce the winners of their very own copy of Ogilvy on Advertising before we move forward and wrap up.
My pleasure, and I apologize in advance if I'm going to butcher anybody's last name. That's certainly not my intention, but congratulations to Suzanne Laurent, Kathleen Stepp, Thomas Apaya, William Birch, Aaron J., oh boy, Kimberly, we'll just leave it at that, Sean Moss, Chris Thornton, Donna Orlick, and Molly Carter. You all will be getting emails confirming this, and you'll be getting those nice smiley boxes from Amazon with your very own copy of Ogilvy on Advertising. So you'll be ready for next month's discussion.
Now, thank you, Katie, and remember that you have this opportunity every month to win next month's book. Katie, I know that
sign up again. Once you're in, you're in.
Yay! I know we are really pushing the envelope here. So Clayton, do we have time to take a question or two, or should we maybe take these to the Facebook conversation? And could I ask if you'd be willing to join me, Clayton, and maybe respond to a couple posts of questions we didn't get to today? How does that feel to everybody?
It's totally up to Katie. We got 4 minutes left before you.
I think we can run through these questions.
Go for it.
Marcella, so we might get a little faster. First question, Clayton, and I'm smiling because I want to hear this answer. Sue wants to know, do you see the return to print mailing?
Yeah, it surprised the heck out of me, actually. Basically, I think we're coming full circle on this whole internet thing now. And I think our prospects' inboxes are packed with stuff. Meanwhile, their mailboxes are not packed with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're looking at that inbox and they're saying, instead of being all excited, you've got mail, they're going, holy crap, I got mail, you know. It's getting to be a real pain in the butt. And so we're seeing.
It's actually a treat when I do get like a real letter in the postal mail now.
Right, and I'm seeing response rates come up. Now in the financial area, it's really sad because the size of our marketplace has shrunk to a tenth of what it was just a few years ago in terms of direct mail lists. But on the lists that remain, we're getting some pretty impressive response rates to our direct mail pieces. So in other markets that haven't shrunk, like the health market, I think every market's going to benefit from this in terms of direct mail. And like in the health market, I think the sheer size of that thing, if this same phenomena occurs there where response rates are starting to rise, is going to be really a great way to make money for copywriters.
Fantastic. Kevin wants to know, when you were talking about question-style headlines and self-selecting, his question is, can't a properly focused question-style headline self-select the right people in your general audience of readers, the ones who will be most likely to respond to the appeal of your copy?
Yes, of course. And when we were talking about that, basically, I was fine with what Schwab said about the components of a solid question-based headline. I added a couple of other criteria of my own. If you're into self-selecting, rather, if you're segmenting with copy rather than segmenting with the media selection, so that you have to call out your customer, then a question is a good way to do it. Carlene Cole is famous for her headlines about, got hemorrhoids, got this, got that.
Right.
And they work well for her. So, she calls those things out. But remember what we were talking about in terms of broadening the market. When you call out a particular prospect, you're excluding, by definition, the rest of the world.
Right.
So, if you're okay with that, then fine. If your product is that focused, if it's just a blood sugar product, and that's all it does, then the headline that Marcella was talking about is perfect, right? But if your product addresses things, blood sugar, but also other things, then that headline will exclude some people that might have otherwise been good prospects for you.
That's a great way to put it.
And then the final question, and I guess this should be the kickoff for the discussion at the bar at boot camp, because it's a men versus women.
Okay.
It sounds like Clayton's general approach is contrary to the later part in Schwab's book about appealing to men versus women. Men are more concerned about long-term issues, women about more immediate. is Clayton's suggestion, or Clayton is suggesting we're all short-time thinkers. Is this correct?
Interesting that you would get that from my comments. I agree with Schwab, by the way, wholeheartedly, that women are harder to sell to. I think every guy I know is married to a woman who's smarter than he is, for one thing. Secondly, every couple I know, the woman has 10, 20 years of experience in seeing through the guy's bullshit and his argument for why he should get the new Porsche. So she's more skeptical. So, you know, it's hard to sell to somebody who's smart and skeptical, you know. But
I think, Clayton, maybe what he's talking about is when we were speaking earlier, we were talking about how you have to keep capturing people's attention and you have to promise them a reward that's going to happen like right now. So we spent a lot of time saying you can't make a prediction that's 6 months from now. But I don't think that really is addressing long-term issues versus short-term issues.
No,
it's sort of different.
I agree, and I think, you know, the biggest customers today for retirement products are men, not women, and those are very long-term products. But I think it's human nature for all of us, men and women alike, to want instant results. We all want the magic pill.
Right, we're hardwired for instant gratification.
And we don't want to give you our money today in hopes of a solution that may occur a year from now, or even next month.
Right.
You know, and that really is not a male or female characteristic. It's just simply that it's prudent. When I spend my, I go to the grocery store, I lay down my money, I walk out with my groceries. You know, I don't want to be in a situation where I have to give you money now in hopes of getting some kind of return, far into the future. I want something now. I want a special report in my hands today that I can use to start making money or to improve my health or to do whatever the product does.
Well, and it's also the prevention versus cure that we always talk about in health, right? Like, I want to cure the arthritis I have now. I'm less motivated to do all the things my doctor's telling me I should do so I don't get arthritis 10 years from now.
Right. Well, the prevention, if it's added to an immediate cure, is a very good thing. But
if you tie them together, if you get both.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
Just give me your money and then trust me.
Right.
The other thing about women that makes them harder to sell to is that they're inveterate shoppers. You talk to a guy and he's going to say, I need to run out and buy a new socket wrench. Women don't run out and buy anything. Women go shopping.
Yes, we do.
We find it, kill it, drag it back to the cave. For most women I know, the experience of shopping is a reward in itself. And this is stereotypical. But guys,
and we're using stereotypes because that's how when you're writing copy, in your brain it might not be politically correct, but we have to in some ways resort to stereotypes because we're casting the widest net. We're trying to find the greatest common denominator in the audience. So that doesn't mean that all women are like this or all men are like this. It just means that in our experience, the majority of our audience will fit one of these profiles, and that allows us to make that assumption in our copy.
By definition, demographics and psychographics are stereotypes.
How could they not be?
Stereotypes are a stock in trade. So we're looking for the edge of the majority rather than the 100% certainty that all women are this way, all men are that way. But we're looking for the inclination, to be one way or the other. So, if you're a shopper, then you resist making a decision immediately. You may want to shop price. You may want to look around. You may want to think about it, sleep on it. I know Wendy does. Drives me crazy. I want to buy it now, So,
And we could point out that new picture of your motorcycle that we've been seeing lately, too.
Okay. I have one last question, and this will be the one that we continue on. Clayton, do you find attractive women used in advertising is more appealing to women than attractive men in advertising?
Absolutely. There was a study done. It was called the Daniel Stark Study of Readership, and it was conducted over a period of, I think it was 10 years, might have been even longer, and it was back in the 70s. And they determined that if you want to capture a man's attention in an ad, the number one thing you show him is a mode of transportation. It can be a helicopter, a boat, a car, a motorcycle, anything that goes fast. That's the number one thing he wants to see. Number two thing he wants to see is a good-looking woman. And at the very bottom of his list is a child. On a woman's side, the number one thing she wants to see is another woman, an attractive woman. It should probably be age-appropriate, you know. The number two thing she wants to see is a photograph of a child. And at dead last on her list is a picture of a man.
Oh, and at the bar, we shall have a lengthy discussion on why that might be so.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. And Marcella, I'll let you wrap things up, but I'm honored to have had a front row seat here. Thank you.
Clayton, I cannot thank you enough. You've gone above and beyond, as you always do. You've way over-delivered on the content. You've stayed on the call a whole nother half an hour with me. You've done this while you're on vacation, right, this week. I really want to tell you how much I appreciate this, how much value I get from your teaching. I'm thrilled that you're going to come to boot camp again. You're just one of my favorite speakers that I always look forward to hearing. And I just, you know, there's nothing in this for you. You're doing this out of the kindness of your own heart. We don't charge for these calls. Just the fact that you said yes and agreed to jump on and do this and spend an hour and a half really teaching us, I cannot thank you enough and tell you how much I really appreciate this. And I have gained so much myself on this call, and I hope all the listeners have as well. And I really, I just want to thank you sincerely for taking the time to do this with us.
Thank you. I love doing it, and I hope it helps.
Oh, it does help. I want to remind folks, if you want more of Clayton all the time, there's at least 3 different products. You can go onto the AWAI website. If you're coming to boot camp, be with me in the front row, where we're going to get a lot more in-depth on the emotional benefits. Meet us at the bar where we'll have the great war of the sexes, which I think will be a riot. And join me next month with my other cohort in crime, David Deutsch, as we talk about Ogilvy on advertising. Thank you all for staying with us so long today. I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I know I did. And join us on Facebook for the discussion, and we'll keep it going. So moving on to the next book in our Common Core. Thanks,
wonderful.
Katie.
We're getting lots of very nice notes in the discussion. So thank you all very much for participating. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Talk to you later. Take care.